I reviewed the G16 by Haute42, now Cosmox Gaming, and while I thought it was a really nice sized, super portable, leverless unit that uses GP2040, that's fully featured, the use of MX switches presented a little bit of a problem in that it does make the caps stick up a bit more than, say, other controllers. Well, Haute42, Cosmox, has heard my plea, and they came out with the S16. All the portability of the G16, same form factor more or less, a little bit thinner and low profile buttons just like the T16 and a lot of their other models. So, how will this compare? How will I like it? Well, you're going to have to stay tuned. I'm Zevros with the arcade stick, and of course I'm going to be going over an overview, internals, pros, cons, lab time, and all that good stuff to find out, is the S16 for you? Stay tuned. Let's get things started with an overview of the S16, starting with what's included. Besides the controller, you do have an accessory bag with extra rubber feet, a little switch puller, and some extra nubs for the option buttons, which you can change the color of because there's black and red. There's a plain USB cable A to C, an extra switch, it's a chalk V2 red, and finally a little instruction card. Let's go ahead and get into the S16 proper. Now, like a lot of Haute42 products, there are 16 buttons, and this being the S16. And of course, 4 option buttons, 1 turbo button. Like the G, you have 2 connection points, so if you like a right angle connection, you have that. If you have a front connection, you can use that. You also have USB-A pass-through, so if you have a Magic Boots or Booter 5 or whatever device you like to use, you can shove that in, and now you have PlayStation 4 and 5 compatibility, which is always nice. Alright. Anyhow, yes, as you can see, those are LED lit and controlled by GP2040. So once again, you can program that the way you like. Status screen, of course, so you can see that in action. And yep, this guy is pretty tiny. So just to compare, here is the B16, which is just hangs off just a tiny bit over here, but is definitely there. You can see that quite well. And then let's compare that to the R16, which is not going to fit in a frame, but this will. So yeah, definitely this is the more portable option, but it does match up perfectly with the G16. So if you're wondering which one of those between the S16 and the G16 you want, well, I'm going to talk about that later. Anyhow, let's apply this out. Something that's easy to miss is you do have a status LED, and it's blinking like crazy because I'm just connected to a power source, no actual system. And yeah, this is another acrylic sandwich setup. It's quite a bit thinner than the G16. I'll point that out later. You'll have a direct comparison. On the back, let's do that while I flip it around. You do have like this frosted acrylic and an input mode guide, so you can see. And yes, the switches are removable. And speaking of the switches, these are the chalk V2 reds, and I'll bet in future revisions of the S series, you're going to have the Crystal series by Haute42/Cosmox. So that's pretty much the high-level overview of the S16. Once again, yeah, on the sides here you have your pass-through, a connection USB-C, and you should also have, yeah, there it is. As always, if you have a little SIM tool or something you can put in there, this is the boot cell button, emergency button. You just hold that down while plugging in, and now you can flash nuke and then flash the firmware, and you should be back to where you were in case you blew something up. Anyhow, let's get into dimensions, internals, and all that good stuff. Let's go ahead and take the dimensions of the S16. So, lengthwise, we're looking at just over 7.5 inches, so right there, and I'd say it's about 192, 195 millimeters. Vertically, we're looking at just shy of 5 inches, and I'd say it's about 122, 125 millimeters there. And as far as thickness, let's break out the calipers since I have those now. For just the acrylic itself, we're looking at 1/2 inch and change. But if we go ahead and include the button, preferably without pressing it, it's just, now we're at 6 and about 3/4 inches. Or, just to get those in millimeters for you metric fans, about 17 millimeters and change. And just for the acrylic only, that's just shy of 13. Let's get a weight on the S16. 13.2 ounces. I think it's pretty respectable. Something you can carry around without it being too obnoxiously heavy. So it's something you can easily carry around, and it's still pretty durable. Let's do a quick size comparison with the S16 versus some other Haute42 controllers, just because, I can give you the numbers, but if you see it as a difference, it might, coerce you to buy one way or the other, right? Anyhow, here is the M12 Plus. It is the biggest controller as of this recording out there. I mean, the M16 Plus is also out there. It's the same size, just different buttons, but just as a direct comparison, here is the S16. So you can see it's feels like 1/4 of the size, and if I do it vertically, you get a different perspective. Also comparing to, let's say, the P12, it's still a bit smaller than that. So if you need something very, very portable, this is definitely something to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and take a look at the internals of the S16, starting with the top. I just want to get under one of these caps and see what's going on. So I did cheat a little, but just so you know, these caps are a little bit differently sized than the other Haute42 caps. So do be mindful of that. And these, normally I use a switch puller just because, that's the right tool for the job, but these guys have been obstinate. I'm not going to tell you how many tries I needed, but there you go. So the default ones have 3 pins, but the third pin's not very useful. Anyway, just to take a look, we have kind of the standard Cosmox Haute42 stuff going on, single LED, and then 3 pins and a center pin here. So these are Chalk V2 once again, as they like to do. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a future variant of this use crystal switches, maybe a S16 Pro. Anyway, to replace a switch, just line up the metal pins as appropriate and shove down until you get satisfying clicks, and then place the cap back on. All right, next up, we'll go ahead and open it up, and I got a little bit of surprise there. Let's go ahead and disassemble the S16. Now, it's held together by 6 of these carriage bolts, Chicago screws, whatever you want to call them. And before you begin, I recommend you have a towel, something soft to lay this on. You're not really going to scratch up a whole lot, but why take the chance? Also, I recommend you have something to hold your screws if you are disassembling this to install artwork, clean it out, do whatever. And all you really need is like a Phillips 0 or 1. I'm just using my precision screwdriver. Let's go ahead and drop that last screw and put it away. All right, so again, it's just layers of acrylic. You have this frosted cover on the back, followed by this little spacer plate. Then the PCB itself, which is probably the most interesting part. Now, this acrylic here will come off only if I take out all the switches and caps. I haven't done that because it's, it's just kind of there. It's sort of a spacer for it. Anyhow, let's go ahead and take a look around the back. So you have your hot swap sockets here. And here's your RP40 chip, your USB-C ports, boot button, which you can access just with a pin or something else, sim tool. This is a good time also to take a picture of the pins in case you want to map. And here's your A port. Otherwise, you can see the backs of the LEDs. Really exciting stuff. And there you go. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to install artwork, and actually in my case I laser cut some acrylic from Houston Acrylic. This is their koi ink splatter, so I'm going to slot that in there. That is a 1/8, and then I have a paper overlay that I also laser cut. And of course, if you want artwork for your stick, come to the arcade stick, and we've got a number of artists just waiting to help you out with that. Anyway, that's there, so let's flip this over carefully since I do have a back template. I am going to put the spacer board in, and then I want to make sure I have this little hole matched up, and I do, so that's good. Then I'll do the same for this overlay. And from there, I just want to attach this. And all I do from here is reinstall this carriage screws. Now I got some different ones, so I'm going to try those out, and then I'll show you the final product. Okay, here's the finished modified product. Now I did put on some new carriage bolts, just because these are 12mm versus the stock, I believe, 10mm, and they just seem to fit a little bit better. Anyhow, yeah, I have little accents with the koi underneath. I think I may recut the paper layer at some point just to get a little bit more of that lovely pattern out there. But anyway, just to see the back, I really like this. It's a glitter gradient and paper cutout on top. Came out really nicely. Let's move on.
Tired of your bare and boring fight stick? Want a look that sets your controller apart? Need an artist to help make that happen? If you want to rep your favorite characters or games on your stick, we can help. From collage style to full custom art, the arcade stick has you covered with options at several price points to help make your custom fight stick dream a reality. To learn more, head on over to thearcadestick.com.
Welcome to the lab, and let's get started with our usual basic acceptance testing. I'm going to start with some slide and pressure tests. Now, the sliding, because I've already modified this guy, will be a little bit different than the stock or the little nubs. And I've already tested the G in previous videos, so if you want to see what that looks like, you can check there. It's basically going to be the same because of the same form factor, etc. So, pressure tests. And yes, I've tried this with the stock acrylic as well. Does about the same. No real flexing. You can tell I'm trying to twist it here and nothing. So that's good. Now slide test with the grip tape on. It does a pretty good job. I think this is one of the better solutions out there if you don't like it sliding. And it feels good on the lap as well. So let's try it without our foam. And yeah, it's even better, of course. So, still takes, some movement, of course, but you can tell I'm giving this a pretty good smack and it's not moving. So again, if you're looking for the ultimate solution to not sliding, that grip tape is the answer. Let's go ahead and do the basic button test. Now, also turned off any compression or gate or anything so you can hear how these switches and controllers sound. So let's start. Alright, figured I'd play a little VSAV to demo the S16. There we go. So moves generally come out pretty well. Older games are notorious for having much more rigid input requirements. I'm running in SOCD neutral. Found this seems to work best with Capcom Fighting Collection. So there's that. Now, of course, in the lap, it does take a little bit of being careful, I guess, just because it is so much smaller. But on the table, it feels okay. You know, something like the T series a lot more comfortable. Oh yeah, but is this much more portable? Sure. So. But this also gives you an idea of how it realistically sounds when you're playing. Oh, it didn't let me get the command throw. I think it's funny she has one of the best supers in the game with Tenraiha, and yet one of the most useless supers with that. Anyhow. Yeah, so there's an example of gameplay with the S16. Up next, let's do a quick Steam Deck check on the S16. Now, GP2040, very compatible with the Steam Deck, so I'm not worried about it. Just to show you that it's moving around the OS. You know, there you go. And let's go ahead and launch a game. Now, while we're doing that, let's go ahead and demonstrate the measurements. So I'm setting this up again in an ultra compact fashion. So if you're trying to play in a cramped space, I want to show you just how small you can make this with a right angle cable. And this is going to a USB-A, so I needed a converter. If you have a USB-C to C, that'll work fine. Anyway, with the depth here and placing it right up close, you're about 8 inches back, or about 203 millimeters. Width-wise, you're limited by the Steam Deck, which is 11.5 inches, or about 290 millimeters. Otherwise, yeah, it works fine. Let me just show you in game that we're going to be moving around, doing stuff here, and as you can see, it works perfectly. Time for a quick web review of the S16, and we're going to use a private browsing window. I just want to see where does it land in the search results and what's there. Do we have any false claims, any misleading things? So let's get into it. First page, right up there, we have S series, so that's great. Now let's go ahead and make this bigger. Do see a spelling mistake right there. We need an E, but not a big gripe. And this is a little bit messy, but the only real tech thing I really have a problem with is that PlayStation 4 listing without an asterisk. Just because natively it's not going to support it. You need like a Booter 5, a Magic Boots, what have you. So do be mindful of that. Otherwise, everything here is generally okay. And if we go back up to support, we do have instructions for firmware. I would like a video, maybe a little bit more detail, screenshots, something, just to make sure people understand how to do it. We do have some FAQs you can click through, just explains things. So that this is all pretty good. Now, there is some issues though. If you search for like Cosmox instead, we have really, we're just getting to the home, which this is kind of messy. I would like to see these unified at some point. The problem is if you go here, it's not going to list the S series or the G series or many others. And if you go to the home page here, so just Haute42, yeah, you have this now. So they're in kind of the process of merging as of this recording. Like if I go under Cosmox, you'll see what I did before. It's not going to be under here, it's not under here. You get this, which is, hey, we're making this a different brand. But you can still go to product and then under here. So If you didn't know, you were just going to Haute42.com, and that's how you can find it. Otherwise, other than I think this is a very temporary state, confusion and such. We'll see this merge together in the near future, hopefully. The web support for the S is pretty good. Now that we're back from the lab, let's talk about what I liked, could improve upon, and just other observations, wish list items, etc. about the S16, starting with build and build quality. Alright, so this is a Cosmox product, so the build quality is generally pretty good just because we are using that acrylic sandwich method. And again, it's just put a control board layer, put some acrylic on the bottom, put some acrylic on the top, insert some buttons, and you've got a controller that's pretty durable, it's reasonably low cost, it's thin, it's got a decent weight without being overbearing, and won't slide out of your lap just at a breeze. So as a survival strategy, it works. Now, comparing the acrylic and just the size and thickness to the G again, so you can tell once more, especially if you skipped it from earlier, this is a little bit thinner than the G just on the acrylic alone, never mind the buttons. So there is that. If that's a factor too, you need a very thin controller to carry around with you. The added bit of thickness that the G has is going to be a problem. Maybe that comes into your consideration. I don't know. Now, the only thing is with these acrylic sandwiches, you do have kind of the layered look on all times, and maybe some people don't like that. I understand. You know, get other more premium controllers that have a single piece wraparound or something like that that just hides all this, and I can understand. And I think there's an opportunity for an entrepreneur out there I'll talk about later in customization. But overall, the build quality is solid. You've seen it already where I do the pressure tests and nothing really gives, so it's working. A couple other things in build quality. I do like that carried over from the G series. We do have the side USB port and the top USB port, so if one of those works better for you, then you can use it, especially if you have that right angle USB cable or adapter. Feel like it's a little bit more secure. I would still like to see some hook or something that you can tie a Velcro loop around and really secure that cable like I've seen in other builds. Anyhow, the other thing I want to complain about is the included anti-slip. It's, those little rubber nubs. They're not anything fantastic. And once again, I do recommend using this grip tape plus some spacing two-sided tape to make it work. And it really, really helps out on the sliding and just making it more comfortable on your lap, actually. So that's a better solution. I do wish something out of the box is better. I do know that Focus Attack now has pads for a lot of Cosmox products, so you can go look over there if you want something a little more professional, I guess, and that's an option for you. Let's move on to features and performance. And feature-wise, well, yeah, it is kind of that almost now standard Cosmox feature set, which is not bad. I mean, you get the status screen, you get RGB, you get a turbo button, which is nice. I do wish there was a function button, but, maybe in the future. Anyhow, you do get a pass-through port, USB-C, GP2040, so you've got a really good complete feature set. It's kind of hard to argue with. It feels good and lets you do all sorts of things, so I'm happy about that. A question does come up about the extra buttons on the 13 and 16 variants of Cosmox controllers. Is that tournament legal? And my answer is that depends. You've got to check with your rule set, you've got to check with your TOs. So there are two answers if you're playing by very strict rules and they say, hey, you can't have two ups, you can't have two L3s. What do you do? And you don't want to buy an entirely new controller. Well, you have two options. One is you just physically take off the cap and the key switch, so just remove those. The second is you go into GP2040's web config and you just turn those off. Just go into the pin settings and you can do it from there. Now you may have to still demonstrate, hey, TO, I'm pressing this, it does nothing, you can see that's doing nothing, and they'll go, oh, okay. But it is a way without having to disassemble your controller a little bit. Okay, so what about performance? How well does it feel when you play? And yeah, again, as I said in the lab, it feels really good. If you're one of those VSAT players like me that you want to do a push block by sliding, there's absolutely no resistance. I've done a few reviews of Cosmox controllers where you try and do it and there's button rings, or even on the G, you can kind of do it, but you can feel your finger catching a little bit, so that might be just something that bugs you. But on this, it's super smooth. Just, it happens. So if you are looking for something that lets you do this sort of mash, the S is really great for that. Otherwise, I mean, it feels really good, especially on the table. Lap playability, again, I'll talk about it later, but it's a smaller thing, so for me, I have to like balance it on one leg or something, so table playing is much more optimal with this guy. But yeah, otherwise, I'm pretty happy with how it plays. Next up, let's talk about customizing your S16, and clearly I've done so already. Yes, you can do the art inserts on the front and back. That's the really easy way. You probably don't have to change the carriage bolts, Chicago screws, whatever the binding screws are holding this together. But if you're like me and you want to know, hey, how do you do that cool laser cutting stuff? What thicknesses can I use? The Koi ink underneath is a 1/8 inch thick acrylic from Houston acrylic, and the top layer, which is just clear, that's a 1/16 inch. So there you go. Now you know. They actually have vector format files over on the Cosmox Discord, which is nice because I find that a lot easier to feed into my laser cutter software. Anyway, so yeah, you can do art front and back. You can obviously change the color of your RGB lights, etc. in here, or just use one of the pre-programmed patterns. So that's great. Now, I would like to see, and this is a wishlist item / entrepreneurial opportunity for someone out there who has 3D printing manufacturing experience, is like sort of a case, at least for the outer layer here. You have to take into account the USB-C ports and the pass-through port. Something that hooks maybe into here and just gets the edges. Something that will be a sort of pseudo bumper around the edges and can come in different colors, I think would be a really cool opportunity for you. Anyhow, just my ideas aside, what else can you customize on this? Well, there is one other thing, and that is the key switches. Now, in the past, the red V2s, which I'm not really enthused about, I mean, they do the job okay. That was kind of your only choice, that and the brown, that and the blue. But nowadays, there's the low freeze, there's the Element series by Kalich, there's the Season series, there's now the Deep Sea series, and I think there's a few others, like SGF has their own lineup. So there's a lot more choices you have. I really love the palm switches that are out there, especially the Shadow series. I've been using those. So if you want something smoother or whatnot, you also have options from Cosmox themselves, the Wind Engine and the Crystal. So yeah, there's all sorts of options now for Chalk V2. Now, are they as fully optioned as, say, the MX compatible line? No, not a chance, because there's like 10,000 of those out there at any given moment, and it feels like 100 of them come out every day. So yeah, you don't have as many choices, but you now have a lot more choices. One last thing to mention in this section is, yes, you are getting clear acrylic even stock, so it's going to tend to leave behind fingerprints. That's a fact of life. Sorry. The mitigation for that is you get a different kind of acrylic, which is not probably too practical for most folks. So otherwise, just have your buddy the microfiber towel around to clean those off. That's customization. Let's talk about portability and size. And yep, this is a travel size controller, so it fits pretty neatly into most any bag, purse, etc. Works great. And I wanted to demonstrate this little tablet case I have down here. This is a 7-inch G-form sleeve. I managed to grab these off eBay from really cheaply. And there you go. It's contained. I could probably throw in, because of how thin it is, my cable and not mash it up too much. So it fits great. Now, of course, I alluded earlier to this. Because of the size, it's a little hard to position in a lap and just feel comfortable with, compared to something like the T, the R, the U, the M series, which are bigger, and you just throw them down and you're set to go. It can be a little challenging sometimes getting this position in just a way that you can just eventually not feel like it's there, right? That it's just, okay, I'm playing games now. Now, it's not as bad as, say, the mini board or the B series, which are even smaller, but that factor is still there. Next up, I want to talk about documentation and miscellaneous items. First of all, documentation. Yes, you do get the little pamphlet, and it's adequate. I would like to see a digital version available on the website, though, for every model they have. Just because it's easier to store it on your phone than, maybe you lose this thing, never take it out of the box, gets shredded, whatever. It's not always the most convenient thing to have to carry around. Whereas, I can just put it on my phone, dig it up when I need it, and there I go. So if I accidentally get myself stuck into right stick mode, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know how to get out of it, I can load up my PDF or whatever file it is, look it up, and I'm good. Sure, you could web search it, but maybe you were at a major tournament where Wi-Fi isn't very good or what have you. You don't want to have to panic and scream, oh, I can't get out of this mode. Just have it there, have it available, and I think that'll be better. Now, next up in documentation, I already went over some nitpicky things in the web review over in the lab section, but just to rehash it really quickly, a few typos, and they are kind of in the midst of merging, the Haute42 stuff with Cosmos label, or moving that under, whatever they're going to be doing. So I kind of expect in the next few months we'll see the S, the G, the M probably get moved over there. I'm hoping that's what's going to happen, because I've complained before in some reviews that, hey, they haven't merged these guys together yet, so when's that going to happen? I just want everything under the Cosmos label, and there you go. Now, as far as miscellaneous items, there's just a little bit of detail I would like, and other stick manufacturers do this, like Hori or PXN, etc., is that they'll have a model number and serial number, all that information printed on the back, and I think that could be put on the PCB layer pretty easily on the stock S16, so you can see that and say, okay, my model number is this, my serial number is this, and that just enables better support, and it just feels more professional. So hopefully that's going to come later down the line for Cosmos products. Okay, finally wrapping up pros and cons with value. And that is not just, hey, it's really cheap. It's, I'm paying, this amount of money and getting this amount of features, or vice versa. And with the Cosmos S16, yeah, you're getting a really good value. You're getting a great feature set, very well-performing controller, and for not a lot of money. I'm seeing prices around 45 to 55 or so. Now that doesn't include, say, a authentication dongle like the Booter 5 or the Magic Boots or something else, so you may have to factor that into your spending as well. But as far as a base controller, I feel like you're getting a pretty good value for your money. Final judgment time. Is the S16 worth your time, your consideration, and your money? Well, I think if you're looking for a controller that's ultra portable and yet remains fully featured, this fits the bill very nicely. Sure, it may not play in the lap as well as I'd like just because of the small size, but if you need something to be with you, here you go. It's very easy to pack in a very small case, and you're set. You can keep something maybe in your car or whatever if you're going out to some place to play, and that way you are set to go. Now, of course, if you are looking for something that's more lap playable, yeah, this is not really it. You can throw that on a lap desk, I'm sure. So, if you want something that's portable yet can play at home, here you go. And of course, if you like the Switch customization that's on its cousin, the G series, yeah, this doesn't have it as much, but I feel like newer Switches that are out there in the Kale, Chalk V2 format are pretty good. I really like that Shadow series, and Cosmos has their own wind engine variant of the linear. Also, Kale has their own Element series now, which is pretty much the low freeze, one for one, just different colorway. There's few other options on the horizon. So while there's not as many options, there are some quality options that are out there now, so I can definitely recommend it. Hey everyone, you know what time it is. Shameless cat exploitation time, where I show you a kitty and you provide them with the likes, the comments, and subscriptions, the YouTube refrain. So if you found the content of this video helpful, informative, insightful, please leave that like, or if you just like Sully, that's a reason too. If you found that you have questions or suggestions, or just want to say, parts you liked, etc., feel free to leave a comment below. Really appreciate it. And if you have a question, I usually try and answer within a week or so. And finally, if you want to see more content from me when you release the next video, then, hit that subscription and ring that bell. You've all seen it before. Anyway, this has been Sully, and if you don't like, comment, subscribe, he's gonna get you.
The arcade stick.